What's going on? Are we back? Are we back on live? I believe so. Excuse us for that technical difficulty. It seemed we had a glitch in the matrix, as they may say, you know, or an EMP from one of the sentinels. We got shut down for a brief second or a minute, but thanks to the ingenuity and diligent minds of Israelites, the lesson still continues. And we last left off on, we was on like Exodus. Yeah, we last left off on wanting to get to Exodus, and we were talking about visual arts, graffiti in particular. So anybody that caught that last in, or anybody that just came in, graffiti, origins in New York, really big in Los Angeles, California as well too. But let's see, again in the scriptures, where what we know is graffiti and not that Banksy graffiti. Where did that come from? Let's get the book of Exodus 20, verse 4 through 5 first.
Verse 4, thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them.
That's it. That was the ordinance. It said, thou shalt not make any graven images of anything anywhere in the earth, and you shall not bow down to them, because that becomes idolatry, and that becomes putting something else above the power of the Most High. But that does not negate the fact that we can create these pieces of art. You know, if you had seen earlier from the camera on us, we got pieces of art right here. We got a I don't think this is a ram's horn. This is a different animal's horn. And we have, you know, we have lion's head made out of metal. So we for sure, right here, we for sure been creating images. You know, the Most High just said, don't be creating no images and then worshiping them. But go ahead, go ahead and decorate. Go ahead and you know, beautify and create these images, these likenesses to things, because you know you have it's on you. You have the ability and the skill to do it, and that's exactly what we was doing with graffiti. And let's get to the book of 1 Kings, chapter 5, verse 31. And even again within our own temple. So when you understand that law, you just have to understand the context of it. Don't worship the things that you create. Create them for their use. Just don't put them above the Most High. But this is what was going down in its likeness to graffiti, art in our own, or rather the temple that Solomon made, which was our own temple. 1 Kings chapter 5.
Is that 2 Kings or 1 Kings?
It is 1 Kings. Because 2 Kings, Solomon is not in the mix. That's for sure. 1 Kings chapter 5, verse 31 through 35.
Oh, got that one. Let me see. That might be
1 Kings chapter 5? You don't have chapter 5?
Look, chapter 5.
Verse 31.
There's no 31. You mean 4? Oh, it's probably up.
Okay, hold on. Give me a second. Maybe I took that scripture down a little bit incorrectly. 1 Kings chapter. Oh, excuse me, chapter 6. 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 31. My bad, Doc.
Con. All right, this 1 Kings chapter 6, verse 31. And for the entering of the oracle, he made doors of olive tree. The lintel and side posts were a fifth part of the wall.
So this is a particular door that is to the Holy of Holies. So the space in between, the transition right before the most holiest part of the temple. So this is what these things were made out of.
Keep going.
Yes.
The two doors also were of olive tree, and he carved upon them carvings of cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, overlaid them with gold, and spread gold upon the cherubims and upon the palm trees.
So these were carvings that were made into the door. He put images on them. He said he put palm trees, flowers, cherubims, and then overlaid them with gold. How is that any different than, you know, the stencil sketches that we put on the street, you know, obviously not carved, but through paint and graffiti and spray paint alone, and the colors that pop out? That's no different than overlaying those wood carvings with gold to make those images pop out. That's the same concept that we be doing on the streets with graffiti and tagging as well too, because tagging is a little more basic. But continue, because we did that on more than just the doors.
Verse 33. So also made he for the door of the temple's post of olive tree, a fourth part of the wall. And the two doors were of fir tree. The two leaves of the one door were folding, and the two leaves of the other door were folding. And he carved thereon cherubims and palm trees and open flowers, and covered them with gold fitted upon the carved work.
So again, yeah, that specifically just with the door. No different. If we can go back to the slide. No different than how we decorate our streets with our graffiti, if we can get to this image. So now we see from that same article, you can't really read it up there, so I will read it. We have a Jake on the left named Charlie Ahern. I'm going to read the subtext. Charlie Ahern, image of the Fab Five Freddy in front of one of his paintings in 1980. Image will be viewed, PP Pals. That's some side information, but this is just one. This is one iconic figure within the origins, the beginnings of graffiti in New York. His name is Charlie Ahern. And the next picture is a 10-tribe brother, Latino, Lee Quijones. And his picture art, Howard the Duck, 1988. So those are two just examples, images. And you can see what I was talking about earlier about the incorporation of the name and then an image that goes along with it that street art blew up and took off with when I was talking about the dude from Europe, Edomite Banksy, and his popularization of street art and everybody that's, you know, on that. We were already doing that with our name styles back then in the 80s, and Lee Quijones was a perfect example of that. And you still see that, you know, being traditionally done, but a lot of media outlets that, you know, deal with graffiti now, often, you know, you see the faces are portrayed as white, but again, no different than you know, in the underground boxing and such like that. For the most part, Israelites are still doing these things, and one of the codes for doing graffiti is, you know, is be doing these things in silence and in secret, and then you know, they're there, and if you know the guy, you know the guy. If you don't, you're not supposed to. You know, your face is not supposed to be too much of a big thing, which is a perfect thing for, you know, blacks and Latinos, because we're for sure going to get busted and put into jail for something like that. But yeah, here's some more images. Right there, painting, doing that graph. We got Latinos, we got blacks, we got Israelites, you know, just doing this thing. This is within us to do. And it's if you really look and study into the letterings and people's names and stuff like that, and the images they associate with them, it's just it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's cryptic. You know, the idea of transforming your name into something almost illegible, like looking at, you know, for the first time maybe, you know, an Arabic script. That's kind of the likeness that they take these English alphabets and make them into, and that's just the style, you know. That's just the style that our people came up with, and everything from your high school notebooks that our people do to getting them out in the street, and then the culture vulturing that goes along with it. We know for surety Israel, blacks and Latinos in New York, Los Angeles, everywhere else in between, you know, Brazil too. We are the foundations and the founders of doing this particular style, you know, of visual art. And, you know, visual art, of course, you know, in history we've always been doing that. You know, the pyramids all throughout the Americas. That's no different than, you know, that same likeness or spirit that Solomon had when he constructed the temple to the Most High. Of course, these pyramids weren't in righteousness, but that skill to do it was still within our people to do it. You know, Machu Picchu, the Pyramid of the Sun. Those are, you know, some examples. Even in West Africa, the Palace of Timbuktu. When you see that, you know, that fortress, that is there, still standing to this day. You can only imagine what it might have looked like at the time being in the 800s, 800 AD, 1000 AD, the Palace of Timbuktu. So we've been doing this creating, and you know, these different visual art motifs that we have within us to create. You know, we were the ones that were really, you know, doing the labor in the building of the temple for Pharaoh in Egypt. Regardless, so we're gonna keep taking that that former of all things spirit with us and what we do. The next one I want to get into, dealing with poetry. Poetry, the use of our words to convey a similar sense of, you know, art. We know we covered martial arts, we covered the music arts, we covered visual arts. Everything that we do is as the former of all things by way of the Most High can be classified from us doing it as a type of art, because it's a skill. It's a skill. We are very skillful people. Play skillfully on the string instrument. Create skillfully with this spray paint. Fight skillfully with your hands, and write skillfully with your words. Poetry. Let's get to the book of Psalms 49 and verse 4.
It's the book of Psalms, chapter 49 and verse 4. I will incline my ear to a parable. I will open my dark saying upon the harp.
So I will incline my ear to a parable. A parable in today's terminology would be no different than a metaphor or a simile. You know, if you remember that in your English class or whatever. That's essentially the same thing when it's talking about parables in the scriptures. They're metaphors, they're similes, they're the likeness of one thing representing or one thing having a deeper represented likeness to another. What was the second part of that scripture?
I will open my dark saying upon the harp.
Yes, those dark sayings. It's a dark saying because it's not easy to comprehend. No different than you being in your room in the middle of the night. It's 2:47 a.m. and unless you have a mental picture of where everything is, that desk that you got, in the corner of your room, you might not know what's right there on the center left. You can't really tell. Is that a pen or is that a carrot? I don't I'm not too sure because it's dark. It's not easily perceived because there's no light. That's the same thing with when it comes to writing poetry, when it comes to metaphors, similes, parables. It's not something easy to grasp entirely, because on the surface value you're thinking about he's just talking about, well, actually let's actually read one. Langston Hughes. Let's read this and then I want to get into him a little bit. This poem is called Island by him, and it says, you want to read it? Yeah, all right. Island by Langston Hughes. It says, wave of sorrow, do not drown me now. I see the island still ahead somehow. I see the island and its sands are fair. Wave of sorrow, take me there. So a lot of people in your schools and teachers, and even music today, they'll say, oh, it's our songs, excuse me. Our songs, our lyrics, they're open to interpretation. It's whatever it's whatever you make it. But When you're dealing with the Most High and his metaphors and similes and parables, they mean one thing in particular, and they're usually coded to the point to where only one particular nation can understand them, Israel, and that's by design. You know, I know this is not that type of class. I'm not going to necessarily, go into a one-on-one discourse of what this poem means, but I mean, if anyone ever wants to come and talk to me and chop it up, we could probably share some, ideas. It's not that difficult, though, at least for me. But Langston Hughes, he was a writer. He knew how to use dark sayings, parables, wave of sorrow. Who associates sorrow with, the waves of the ocean? From the fool looking in, even the fool will probably think that's something foolish. But to those that understand dark sayings, let's get to the book of Psalm 78 and 2. These things, they make sense when it's strung with a particular spirit on them. So Langston Hughes, he's a great example, not the only, of Israelites' history in poetry and writing. Here he has, two books right here. One is actually a book of nonfiction. The other one is a book is like an autobiography. I Wonder as I Wander. That one I still got to finish, and as well as the second one too. But those are two writings that he writes about, and it shows that poetic nature that we have in our creating dark sayings, metaphors, and similes, like the Most High. Although the Most Highs are infallible in truth and usually set to come in some time, but we have that same nature to codify, for lack of a better term, our thoughts and our feelings and what we're going through this artistic expression, which is poetry, and everybody in LA and major cities in America knows about that for sure. I know everybody knows that for sure, because that's what comes along with hip hop, that lyricism to a rhythm, but still lyricism. And granted, maybe that lyricism is a little watered down nowadays as far as what's been putting out on the radio, but that lyricism, the beauty, those dark sayings, they still exist. And everything that's always good, I always say, is somewhere to be found in the underground. And not to say you have to be underground to be great, but you're going to find a vast majority of that there. You got that scripture? It's just parallel. 78 and 2. Yep.
It's the book of Psalms, chapter 78, verse 2. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old.
So same similar parallel, saying the same thing. Parables speaking in dark sayings. We have some more right here going on our 10 tribe in. If anyone's ever seen the film, which is another form of visual art that our people are usually casted in, and maybe not so much creating, but we have a few out there that be doing their thing. But if anyone's ever seen the film Blood In, Blood Out, a lot of Chicanos know about that film for sure. That was actually adapted from poems from this man right here named Jimmy Santiago Baca. And this is actually a book of poems that he wrote, Immigrants in Our Own Land, and selected earlier poems that I had a chance to read a couple years back. It's very good, and it deals with the same struggle that Southern Kingdom and Northern Kingdom Israelites go through, just with a particular tribe's influence, cultural influence on it. Because even within Israel, we have 12 tribes. There's still that uniqueness and diversity in the way we go through things and express things, but it's still, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. And it's a beautiful thing that, we can recognize our brothers and our cousins, within our family, to do these things. But yeah, the film Blood In, Blood Out, very popular film, was written by this man, Jimmy Santiago Baca, who was also a poet. He's also a poet, so you can, look up some more information about him. This book right here, and also poet, Always, or La Vida Loca, Gang Days in L.A., Always Running by Luis J. Rodriguez. This is actually an autobiography book that he wrote, but the way that he tells it and goes in and out of it is very evident. What he lets known to how he, what he lets to be known and what he holds back, and how he fills in the gap between that. If you ever get the chance to read that book, it's very poetic, no different than our Langston Hughes, our Most Defs, Talib Kweli's, everybody that does the differing types of lyricism and hip hop that exists today. And of course, he has his own book of poetry as well too. But that's one of his famous written words, is that one right there. And these two authors dealing with, the former of all things, poetry, very very crucial cultural markers, in everything that was brought up from Langston Hughes to these two writers right here within our culture today. A lot of foundation can be found as far as how we understand what is black culture, what is Chicano, what is Latino culture within these just three artists that are that were brought up at the moment right now. With that being said, I want to get the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 13 through 16.
It's the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 13, and it reads, "Ye are the salt of the earth, but if the salt have lost its savor, wherewith shall it be salted? It is thenceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out, and to be trodden under foot of men. Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven."
So that's you hear a lot about, at least in the community, the Israelite community, about us being, the salt of the earth, or Israelite salt. It's a cool little catchphrase that gets thrown around just to give us that self-accreditation of the things that we do that haven't been accredited, and that is hand in hand with being the former of all things. The things that we do on this earth, no different than salt, and gives its flavor to whatever you're cooking, that particular meat, and even more so too, salt being a preservative of differing meats, so it could last longer. It's no different when Israel is in the mix in the earth, and going both ways, either in righteousness or wickedness. But that's why Yahushua said, if the salt have lost its flavor, it needs to be cast out. So even though we the salt of the earth, if we're not being the salt in these laws and these commandments and in righteousness, it's not going to really be good for, it's not going to be good for the preservation of the earth. And it's not going to be, ultimately sustainable, It's not going to be a sustainable thing. And that's the goal. That is the goal, is to be a salt that is sustainable, a salt that's going to keep this earth afloat, enjoyable, entertaining. And then, as Yahushua goes into further down, being that light. That's what the Most High said is in our inheritance, and being the rod, being the rod of his inheritance. We when we're dealing with things on earth, because the Most High gave us dominion, he said, look, follow these laws, do these things, and then rule and have dominion of the earth. I'm pretty much entrusting you guys with it. You guys handle it, see it, do unto the earth as you see fit, you know, and your uniqueness to use this imagination of yours to create. But do all that in, you know, preserved, salty righteousness. Don't do it in wickedness, because if you do, it's not going to last. And we are getting close to getting away from that and going back towards that preservative of a salt that's in the earth that we've been promised, you know? So, yeah, man, we covered everything, you know. Well, not everything. We covered a lot of ground as far as things that'll catch the eyes, you know, from modern history, you know, dealing with, you know, with music and, you know, even L.A. Again, hip-hop that was created by us, you know. It's currently, you see a lot of foreign or, you know, white rappers in particular, you know, that are getting the money, so to speak, and getting the image and the fame, and it's nowhere as good as, you know, the original of where it came from. You know, they're talking about that record label BS, which is what they're fine with, because they're usually, as far as so-called Edomites, they're the same people as the record holders anyway. So of course they're gonna enjoy that. Even again, dealing with hard rock, and you know, and its different genres and subgenres. You know, you see that salt in Los Angeles. You know, they call it ska-core, and it's a form of reggae, or a ska form of reggae mixed in with that harder version of rock. You know, a lot of that's been copped by your so-called Edomites and white people. You know, taking that hard rock into a more so like a evil, a lot of times an evil direction. You know, that people directly associate, you know, with, you know, Satanism and everything that goes along with that. But in its actuality, when you feel the origins and the roots of like why rock is so aggressive and stuff like that, you got to understand even too, you know, the blues came out of, you know, like a crying out, a sadness, you know, from a loved one, a relationship, hardship that you're going on, and then rock and roll kind of got thrown in the midst with that, and then that anger and that angst and aggression that you see in, you know, different bands like from Bad Brains to Rage Against the Machine, and those were, you know, justified, you know, that justified anger, because Rage Against the Machine, a Latino-oriented band, Bad Brains, so-called black-oriented band, Israelites, they were writing and raging against that oppression that their people and themselves were going up against. Rock now is not, you know, it's just anger just to be angry for no reason. You know, let a white person do it. So, man, all those, even I didn't touch into Yasuke, the greatest black samurai, when he got imported to Japan at that time. And my brother right here in our audience saying that the Lee clan, they had to be dark-skinned people in order to be considered samurais. And then not even forgetting that our people for sure are scattered in Japan and China as well too. So I mean, our people are there and around and everywhere. But we cover, you know, that former of all things, you know, as the New Testament says, the salt. So without too much left to say, that is a aspect and a part of black history, Latino history, Native American history, Israelite history that needs to be correctly given its credits and due for. And I hope that we've definitely done that for you guys tonight. So with that, I want to say good night, good travelings, and shalom.
Shalom.